The last time we watched what happened when privilege gets named and the response is defense. Today, I'm teaching you the alternative. And we're going to be looking at our power and our privilege and what Kuleana, the Hawaiian value of responsibility and accountability, means when you have the privilege of belonging to something bigger than you. You carry the duty to wield that power with respect and to repair what's been harmed. I'm Leslie Tagorda, business astrologer and creator of the Astrobrand method. If you want astrology that actually asks something of you based in decolonial astrological thinking and ethics, hit subscribe. In my Astrobrand certification, the first group curriculum piece is power and privilege. When we are practitioners of any kind, whether you're an astrologer, maybe you're a coach, maybe you're some kind of healer, whether you are in a place where people are seeking advice and insight from you, you are sitting in a place of power, and the power dynamics are in your favor. And for people in power, if they are not aware of their privileges, and that's for all of us, you are wielding an invisible weapon of harm. Now, privilege isn't inherently bad. It's only when it goes unrecognized that it becomes entitlement. A few weeks ago, I was interviewing Dr. Sarah Webb on her book, Colorism. And in her book, Colorism, there is one of my most favorite quotes. And she says, "Let's learn to love ourselves enough that we don't need others beneath us in order to feel whole." And this is the whole idea behind privilege, behind hierarchy, and behind racism. Really, with racism, we are looking at separating people based on their skin tone, based on their culture, so that we can put one above the other. Why do humans feel that we need to be in this top-down hierarchy? Well, as Sarah says, maybe it's because we don't love ourselves enough that we have to place ourselves in this hierarchy in order to feel whole. We're getting rid of that. In the age of Aquarius, we're all learning to love ourselves to our individual unique abilities, unique gifts, that we don't need to put each other on rungs in order to feel whole. And so to look at this, I want us to all recognize our own privileges. Now, no matter what you think, you carry a privilege of some kind. I'm going to go through some of these different privileges. This might not be a complete list, so if you have any more that you want to add, I am so open to hearing. Let's take a look at each one of the different types of privileges. Of course, there's race. In the United States and in most Western countries, if you are white or fair-skinned, your race is definitely of privilege. If you go to other countries, that the dominant race is usually the one in privilege. Of course, there's sex and gender privileges. Sex privileges, whether you're male or female, of course, in our patriarchal world, males still have so much more privilege than females. Of course, there's, just like sex, there is gender. Were you born the gender that you are now living as? Oftentimes when we are trans or we're switching genders, they face a lot of persecution. Sexual orientation. Are you heterosexual? If you're heterosexual, you generally have much more privilege in society than if you are homosexual or any of the other LGBTQIA orientations. Your religion. Your religion can give you privilege. In places like San Francisco, where there's a lot more diversity and it's not as religious, it's not as prominent. But when I was just in Oklahoma and everybody is Southern Baptist, if you were at Southern Baptist, oh boy, you better watch out. Socioeconomic status. Of course, this is financial. This is, what class you are. There, even in the United States, even in Western cultures that supposedly don't have class, we have a lot of class status. Beauty. is a privilege. Whether you are, traditionally beautiful or have a look, beauty can open up a lot of doors for you. Body type is a privilege. Maybe you get to walk around in a thin body type. Maybe you're like me and you have a little bit more weight on your body. Well, who has more privilege? Skin tone, just like Dr. Webb and her book, Colorism, talks all about the privilege of skin tone. And if we've come from any colonized communities, colonial communities, whether, you're Filipino or Indian or Hispanic or Black, skin tone is a huge sign of privilege. Your ability, whether you are able to walk, able to run, have all of your abilities or don't have your abilities. Having all of your abilities are huge privileges, even just to be able to walk through city streets. Education is a privilege. And maybe you had the power and the privilege and the resources and time to get a master's degree like I did. Maybe you didn't. So, of course, looking at your education. Looking at your language. Do you speak the dominant language in your culture, or is that language the second language? All the harm that can come from, I've even like with my son now, and I'm teaching him this because he's like, oh, that person has an accent. I can't understand them. And then he puts the blame on that person to be able to speak like him so he can understand that. Oh, no, sweetie. We are not doing that. That person who has an accent is speaking English as a second language, third language, fourth language. That person has way more knowledge and skill than you do who only speaks English. And so maybe you can open up your ears a little more, have a little bit more patience, have a little bit more curiosity to be able to understand them, because the person who's using English as a second, third, fourth language is working and efforting so much harder than the native speaker. Now, if looking at these privileges, race, sex, sexual orientation, gender, religion, socioeconomic status, beauty, body type, skin tone, ability, education, language, what privileges do you have? Because when you are a practitioner or when you're in a place of power and you're speaking to somebody, and if you don't recognize those privileges and you're just putting blame on the person who doesn't have those privileges for not, accomplishing as much, not succeeding as much, not moving as much, you are missing out on just a whole lot of nuance, and you can really cause harm to that other person. Okay. So your privilege, if you're not recognizing your privilege, if this is invisible to you, this is what makes it dangerous. And this is what creates entitlement. And entitlement to me is like the worst thing that a person can be. Entitled. Because when we have this unrecognized privilege, it causes harm directly. It creates blind spots. You just assume that your experience is universal. You absolutely miss the obstacles and barriers other people face. In part one, when I was talking about Stephen Forrest, his blind spots were huge because of his unrecognized privilege as somebody who's of the dominant race, white, somebody who's heteronormative and cisgendered, somebody who belongs to, a high socioeconomic class, who has had I don't have age in here, who has had, experience and age on his side, right? Oh my goodness. I got to put age on my list. The harm that unrecognized privilege also does is reinforce power structures. You simply just don't see the advantages you were given or the advantages that you inherited. So you just think that, well, everybody, again, just like the blind spots, is just like you. And so you blame the other person for not achieving or not receiving as much as you have. Unrecognized privilege can also invalidate others' lived experience. You might credit your own success to hard work alone. You're the lone wolf. I did this on myself. I bootstrapped, and you erase the role that your privilege played. Like, for example, if you're somebody who went to college on a full scholarship, never had to take out loans, didn't have to have a job, and all of a sudden you're doing really well in school, you put all your time, you're getting investments in your new business. Meanwhile, someone else is paying debts until they're 40, like me, paying off student loans. So really looking if you truly bootstrap, but seeing, how level that playing field was. Did you get to start further along the finish line? Another unrecognized privilege, harm of unrecognized privilege is biased judgments. You mistake privilege for talent when deciding who's best. I was talking about this with Tasha Begg of the Pop Astrologist on IG Live the other day, because I talk to my husband about this all the time. My husband works in technology in San Francisco and has done really well in his career and does a very technical, hard to find expertise. And he always talks about the pipeline. Sorry, words. I'm trying to say things too fast and the words are not coming through quickly enough. In this quote unquote pipeline, we're talking about people who come up from college, who have these Bachelor of Science degrees, computer science degrees, who then go into the right internships to get the right experience, to then rise up the ranks, to then get into these positions where my husband has. And so he complains that there's not enough people coming up the pipeline. There's not enough women coming up the pipeline. There's not enough people of color coming up the pipeline. So it perpetuates more white men, taking over these jobs, these really good jobs. And I told him that the pipeline is a myth because, for example, if there was a brown, a woman of color who is, taking care of kids, taking care of parents, doesn't have the resources to go to like one of the top-notch schools, and instead goes to community college while holding down a job, while doing, childcare and parent care, that person, the woman of color who then goes through and still gets her computer science degree, maybe not from the best school, but look at all of the resources and all of the challenges that she had to overcome. She had to learn resource management for money, time management for, all of the things that she was juggling, still studying, still doing all the things. When you put her next to, the Ivy League trained, who got all of the internships, and you're like, well, he has all of these experiences and she doesn't. You're not looking at her resource management, her time management, looking at all of the skills that she gained just to get her college degree. And so when we look at this idea of biased judgment, you are mistaking privilege, the white guy who graduated from the Ivy League, who had everything handed to him so that he could just focus, for talent when deciding who's best. We really have to look at the whole picture, not just their credentials. Unrecognized privilege is also can do harm by shifting burden. And this is simply like also very, very prevalent in Stephen Forrest's response, because he did not do anything to educate himself, to learn about the harm that he did, to respond to all of the advice that all of his students and his friends had given him about how to reply. Instead, he then shifted the burden onto, people that he harmed in like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. My experience is fine. And so when we do harm, the person who does harm, the person who has the privilege, it's their job to educate themselves, not to shift the burden on the Black community and say, well, how do I make repair? No, it's up to you to learn how to make repair. Another harm that it causes, again, is now the blocked repair. That happens when defenses come up, the walls come up, and replaces accountability. When you can't see the harm, your advantage caused. And so this goes, directly again, he blocked repair. Instead, he wanted to protect his ego instead of protecting those relationships to the Black community, those relationships to the students who, he had a duty to, the students of his school that he has a duty to, that he just decided, nope, I'm out. You guys are on your own. And lastly, the harm that it causes is performative restoration, where you adopt the language of equity without examining your own benefit. Now, no one here, including me, who is teaching this, is perfect. We are all going to fall in these holes at one time. But there's another idea in Hawaiian values called pono. And pono essentially means when you know better, you do better. And so for all of us, this is a learning curve. This is a growth curve where we get to, make mistakes as part of our human experience and do better next time. I know even in the last year, I have done so much better in being able to have these difficult conversations instead of avoiding them and running away based on my own fragility. And so when we are looking at our own privileges, so that instead of becoming unrecognized, they become recognized so that we do less harm, right? So that we know how to do repair. This is the first module in my Astrobrand certification for a reason. My Astrobrand certification students already know their astrology. They already know the Astrobrand method. They already know everything. They've learned everything. But when we come into the certification, this is where we are building our practice, building our voice. And this is an essential module that has to happen first, because you cannot build authentic, equitable, ethical leadership without doing this work first. Right now, Astrobrand certification cohort 3 is open. If you want to find out more, the link is in the description. So our power as practitioners, whether you're an astrologer, healer, coach, or advisor, you hold power and your clients hang on to every word. This astrologer horror story is just one example. One careless line, one careless response can stay with a client for years. Recognizing your own power and privilege and stopping doing harm. And when you've done harm, learning to receive critique without putting up your defenses and make repair so that you can restore those relationships. Now, if you're not a practitioner and if you're a recipient of astrologer, here I want you to take your power back, remembering that no astrologer, no advisor, no AI knows the full you. Speak up for yourself, learn to interpret your own chart so that you can take your power back. Now, cancel culture skips repair and punishes instead of inviting growth. Kuleana asks for something harder and more effort, but so much more potent, timely repair. We all make mistakes. Cancel culture is not the answer. It's transactional, skips repair, and punishes instead of inviting growth. What matters is timely repair. This is Kuleana. When we know better, we do better. Reciprocity has two directions, and both were owed here. Repair to the community you have the privilege of belonging to or the privilege of creating. If you built something, a school, a brand, a following, the people inside of it give you their trust, and that's privilege. With it comes Kuleana. When repair doesn't happen or doesn't happen in time, you don't only fail the people you harm directly, you fail everyone who stood behind you. And that's what we're watching play out in real time. Former students and colleagues quietly removing his name, Stephen Forrest's name, from their sites, stepping back from the school he built. That's not cancellation. That's a community responding to absence of repair. And repair to the people who you actually harmed, not defensiveness, not I'm not a racist. Real repair starts with curiosity, listening to what the people harmed are actually feeling, understanding their perspective fully before saying anything else. You created harm. You have to live up to it. Defending yourself first is choosing your own comfort over their experience. That's the opposite of Kuleana. So to stand in Pono comes from reciprocal conduct in relationship to self, others, and of course, the environment. As I said in part 1 of this series, I'll say it again. His response is a case study in what not to do when making an apology or repair. Apologizing for the upset isn't naming the harm. Defending your own identity isn't listening. That's the entire gap between defense and repair. Recognizing, respecting, repairing, these aren't small acts, and they're really challenging to do, but so important. In a world that asks you to do more, they are more than enough. In part 3, we're going to look at what this eclipse is asking of you to do with your work in power and privilege. That's what's coming up next. If this is the kind of work you want to keep doing, please subscribe. So thank you again. If this episode, if this podcast has touched your heart, please share it with others. Please leave me a rating and review so we can reach the hearts of even more changemakers like you.